Let's get you to New Orleans right now with NBC's Jay Gray on the scene. Also with us, NBC News Justice and Intel correspondent Ken Dilanian, former CIA Director John Brennan, and former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts. Jay, this is now a multi-layered investigation at multiple scenes. Where do things stand there in New Orleans?
Yeah, Anna, let's talk about the investigation first. And you can see I'm in the middle of Canal Street. If you know this city, this is a major thoroughfare shut down, still an active crime scene. Bourbon Street just behind us here. Federal agents as well as local and state police still working there, though we have learned this morning that they do plan to reopen Bourbon Street at some point today to pedestrian traffic. So they expect to get their work done on Bourbon Street and open that up to pedestrians at some point today. While the investigation continues here, there is also an Airbnb, a rental home here in New Orleans, where agents have been looking for evidence. They believe this may have been a home where the explosive devices found inside that truck, as well as in the French Quarter where they were rendered safe, may have been built and could have been built with the help of some friends of this suspect. And so they are looking very closely there, trying to piece together exactly what the relationships may have been, how that may have been carried out. Also in Texas, at Jabbar's home in the Houston area, they've executed a search warrant there and said that they are pouring through some of the digital evidence from his phone, from a computer as well. And so that's where they are focused at this point as far as security is concerned, and especially with the kickoff of the postponed Sugar Bowl in just hours. We've been told that they have really expanded the security perimeter around the Superdome here. They've added personnel, both federal as well as state and local, and more bomb-sniffing dogs. We know that they have worked through the Superdome several times since the attack and plan to do that again today. Both teams, by the way, locked down for hours yesterday before being allowed to leave their hotels, get in an extra day of practice before this game.
And Jay, at least 15 people now dead. Could that death toll still go up? And what are we learning about the victims?
Yeah, unfortunately, Anna, we do believe it could go up. Authorities telling us that there are several people in the hospitals here that are fighting for their life and in very critical condition right now, is how it's been described to me. We know that they are continuing to get treatment there and surgeries as well. As for the victims, a few have been named, many of them very young, in their early 20s, a few teenagers as well, friends that were celebrating New Year's or the Sugar Bowl game on the eve of that contest before it was postponed. A few of them have been named. Tiger Besh, an athlete who played football at Princeton. You've got Reggie Hunter, Nakaira Cheyenne Dedeaux, Matthew Tendadero, Nicole Perez, Hubert Gothrow, and Kareem Badwai. Again, this just a few of the victims here and a few of the families that are struggling now, as this city is. And you know New Orleans, it's a city that's based on tourism. It's a city that likes to celebrate. The three major events that this city hosts every year are the Sugar Bowl, which will go off tonight after being postponed, Mardi Gras, which is coming up, and then Jazz Fest. So they are a city that enjoys their celebrations, but right now there is no celebration. A pall over the city, and a lot of people concerned about where they go from here.
It's a city of resiliency as well, as we've seen it overcome so many obstacles and tragedies in the past. Ken, the FBI not ready to conclude that this attacker acted alone. Take us into that part of the investigation.
Good morning, Anna. Well, actually, law enforcement officials have been telling us they are increasingly moving in that direction, despite what was really kind of a misdirection yesterday when the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge got out before the public and said, we don't believe he acted alone. We're told that was based on a misreading of video surveillance evidence. They thought they saw other people planting those IEDs that were found in the city of New Orleans. It turns out those were bystanders. Those people have been ruled out as suspects. And the police chief said on the Today Show this morning that they don't have additional suspects. What they have are persons of interest. And, you know, the Louisiana Attorney General told Lester Holt last night that she believed that there were potential other people helping him build the bombs at this Airbnb. I'm not aware of any evidence of that. If they had evidence of that, they would have suspects, and that would be a different story. But we don't believe that that is the case. We don't believe that there are terror suspects running around New Orleans, which is why they are allowing the Sugar Bowl to go forward today. That doesn't mean they're not running down every lead. They're very interested in Jabbar's overseas travel, in his online contacts, his path to radicalization. But they are not saying right now that they believe that there are any additional suspects who helped him carry out this New Orleans attack. Anna.
Ken Dilanian and Jay Gray, thank you for bringing us the latest. Please continue to report out anything new here on MSNBC. And Director Brennan, I'm just wondering, how are investigators going to rule out any involvement by others? Are those reported IEDs the key piece of the puzzle?
Well, I think it's certainly one piece of the puzzle, but they're also probably looking very carefully at the suspects' media in terms of cell phone, computers, other types of things, what types of contacts he's had, and mentioned about the overseas travel, and to see whether or not he was in fact radicalized there, whether or not he was accessing some of the ISIS social media pages. ISIS was very effective in terms of leveraging the digital environment and social media to incite and inspire attacks over the course of the past decade or so. And so this is one of the things that I think they're going to be hunting and looking at every single, investigative lead to determine whether or not he was acting alone or whether or not there was some type of support he was receiving of any form when he was planning to carry out these attacks.
Clint, the FBI putting out Jabbar's picture, saying, if you know anything about him or this investigation, please contact us. How unusual is that? And what does that tell you about their investigation?
Yeah, because he is deceased, it's not that unusual to put the picture out. But it does really speak to, they're looking for, I think, a lot of evidence and clues in the, just the past few days about how were the devices constructed? Was this individual alone or working with others or have any other associates? And then any other causes for motivation and ideological commitment. What's unusual about this, you see things financially, family, psychologically, potentially, all lining up is really triggers maybe towards radicalization. But just based on what we know so far, the timeline for radicalization, essentially pushing towards ISIS and wanting to do an attack, it seems to be pretty short, very near the date of this attack. So I think that's what they really want to know is, were there any signs that we missed that this individual was heading down a path to radicalization? What was the motivation? Why Bourbon Street? Why did they pick this location? Was it tied just to ideological motivations? Had he been there before, done some sort of reconnaissance? Or did he just pick this night because it's New Year's Eve and this was a night that he wanted to go there to do his attack because he knew it was going to be crowded? President
Biden actually shared a key piece of information about the attacker and potential connection to radicalization. Take a listen.
The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill.
Clint, if he was posting about ISIS or messages on social media about his desire to kill, should he have been on the FBI's radar?
Really depends on the timeline. Normally, in an online investigation like this, there's a network of online supporters who are really promoting ISIS's ideology, maybe advocating for violence, or helping people plan and plot violence. So far, we haven't really seen that. We've seen him post some videos, which would mean it'd be very difficult for law enforcement just to have information pop up on social media very close to the attack that they would know to react to or know what to do or where to go to. I think this case is a little unusual from many of those that we saw of ISIS-inspired figures maybe a decade ago, where you knew there was a community of like-minded supporters advocating violence. You would see somebody talking about mobilization of violence, and that would give them some sort of tip. This case, at least so far, I've not seen that. Doesn't mean we won't see it, but probably very hard to detect.
Director Brennan, you talked about how authorities are looking into Jabbar's foreign travel. How much could that play into the question of whether he was just inspired by ISIS versus directed by ISIS in this attack?
Well, I think what the intelligence community will do is to reach out to its partners around the globe and in the Middle East to see whether or not Jabbar ever came up on their radar in terms of his travel and whether there was any interaction with individuals of concern. But as Clint mentioned, it's unclear whether or not this is something that was just a recent development in terms of Jabbar's instigation of this attack, in terms of whether he was seizing upon ISIS ideology because he was facing these financial troubles, he had mental health issues, other types of personal challenges, or whether or not this was something that was developed over time in terms of his radicalization. But this is something that I think law enforcement and the intelligence agency were working closely together. We're still less than 36 hours from the incident, so this investigation still is underway, and I'm sure that there's a lot that is known by the authorities that has not yet been released in public. But again, at this point, it's unclear whether or not he had any assistance or help, or whether or not this is the traditional lone actor that just decided to carry out this horrific and heinous attack.
Another key piece of this deadly incident is that the protective barriers on Bourbon Street were not up because apparently they were under repair. And we heard one official yesterday at the presser in the afternoon say they had a security plan, but the terrorist defeated it. Clint, this wasn't some complicated 9/11 style attack. How much planning had to go into this, and how difficult is it to prevent?
Yeah, in terms of planning, it's not particularly sophisticated. It's Bourbon Street. That's the one street everyone knows in New Orleans. It's on a major day for activity. And then I just, wonder, we see that footage there of the truck essentially darting around a law enforcement vehicle. Did he pass by there maybe many times? Was the time of attack chosen for this exact time, or had he been circling for many, many hours to see if there was a potential gap that he could go through? I think we'll be looking through all of that footage. So one thing in a attack like this that's highly impactful is to look for reconnaissance. Did we see this individual here many days, many hours before, possibly planning IEDs or not? How well did he understand New Orleans? Had he been there many times before? And that might be the reason that he chose this location, is he was familiar with it. All of these things, I think, will come out in the next day or two as we start to learn more about this individual.